Welcome back to another episode of the Trauma Queen podcast. I am your host, the Trauma Queen, Jessica Ella. And today's episode is all about how to know if a memory is real. So, one of the most common questions that I'm getting in my DMs at the moment is people saying to me, I've got these memories, I've got having these flashbacks, but I don't know if it's real. I'm not sure if I've made it up. I'm really confused. It's getting worse. I'm having more of them, but I'm just worried that I'm remembering them incorrectly or that they're not real, full stop. And some people have even gone as far as to let me know that other members of their family have memories that match up with the memories that they've got, and they're still questioning it. And they're saying, if they remember as well, then surely it's real. Do you think it's real? A lot of people reach out to me asking, do you think that this is real? Do you think I really went through this? Do you think that this is a repressed memory, or do you think I'm making it up? What do you think? And it actually makes me sad. It makes me really sad for these women and some men too, because I just think nobody is educated on this. And it's such a taboo subject. Nobody's talking about it. They just have nowhere to go and no understanding of what repressed memory is or how it works. And they're coming to me because they're like, here is somebody who's talking about it. Like, she's going to know, she's going to have the answers. When in reality, you have the answers. If you're listening to this and you're wondering, you have the answers, you know. And what makes this so sad is that I can see how much these people have no self-trust. And I remember being there. I remember questioning everything and thinking, is that real? Am I making that up? Or is this a real memory? Is this a flashback? Is this a dream I had? Like, I'm really confused about what's real and what's not real. And I had no self-trust around, no, that's a memory, I know that's a memory. And there was a level of knowing, but I wasn't able to admit it because I didn't trust myself. And that alone in itself is a sign of trauma, because people who haven't had long-term chronic trauma have a level of self-trust. And an indication that you've had that trauma and that you've actually have had things happen to you is the fact that you can't trust your own mind, that you can't trust your own memory. So I just want to validate that and just start by saying that if you've got this lack of self-trust and you're really confused, that's coming from somewhere. That's happening for a reason. So I want to start just really explaining to you what repressed memory is. And to me, the best definition of a repressed memory is dissociative amnesia. It is amnesia caused by dissociation. Why do we dissociate so acutely that we have amnesia? Well, we do it for protection. We do it because in that moment, what was happening, we weren't able to process that as a child. We weren't able to process what was happening in our environment. And so we had to go to a really deep level of dissociation to the point where we were almost depersonalized. And that is what causes the fragmentation of the memory and what causes the amnesia. Now, a memory can't ever, of that nature, especially with that much emotion attached to it, can never fully disappear. So it is what we call fragmented. And our brain goes through this process of fragmentation. And we fragment that memory so that we can, one, keep ourselves safe from it ever happening again. So we store parts of information so that we've got little alarm bells that go off if we ever get in a similar or close to a similar situation. But we also fragment it so that we can forget about it because our brain thinks that we can't deal with it. So a repressed memory is essentially a traumatic or distressing event that has been unconsciously blocked from conscious awareness. So you didn't go, I'm going to forget about that. It was an unconscious thing that happened. It was unconsciously blocked from your conscious awareness. And the reason that your brain did this is because it was too overwhelming to process. And it's not that confusing for any psychs, any therapists out there listening. It's not that complicated. It's not that confusing, and it shouldn't be a taboo subject, and it shouldn't be up for debate. It makes sense to me that the brain is protective. It's designed to help you to survive. Of course, in those situations where you can't run, you can't fight back, you're in a freeze state, you can't move, of course the only way for you to cope in that situation is for your brain to shut down, to fragment what's going on, to separate it. So that's my first point. And I guess what causes repression is obviously, as I said, the overwhelming level of terror or panic or sadness or whatever it is. The person is unable to process it. Now, there is a threshold. There is a threshold of trauma that the brain cannot overcome without dissociation. And each person's threshold for what they can cope with is different, and it depends on how old you were. It depends on how frequently you had trauma. The more that something traumatic is happening to you, your brain develops this coping mechanism where it knows that it can check out and dissociate and have this dissociative amnesia. It knows that it can do that now to cope, which means that the earlier on in life you develop that skill, the more repressed memories you're potentially going to have. Now, this explains that question of like, why do I just keep having more and more memories coming through? It's because you developed that technique early on in life. The brain will shut down the parts of your brain that are responsible for processing of memories. It'll shut down the parts of your brain that are responsible for timekeeping so that you're not having to really experience the duration of what's happening, and it will shut down your logical thinking, emotional regulation, and it will start to fragment that information into snippets. Now, these snippets come back as triggers, and oftentimes if the actual visual memory is repressed, our body is going through the process of the trauma again without our conscious awareness of what's happening. For instance, I used to smell the smell of fresh cut grass and panic. And I wouldn't know why that smell would panic me until I had a memory come back that linked to my dad finishing mowing the grass and him coming inside and abusing me. Now, my brain linked information because I didn't have the actual visual memory. My brain fragmented that the smell of fresh cut grass equals abuse. And so when I smelled that, I felt like something was coming for me because my brain had kept that information to try and keep me safe. But it was kind of, the brain is smart, but it's not that smart because fresh cut grass doesn't always mean he's coming to abuse me afterwards, but that's just how it gathers information. So the way, like, why do repressed memories come back? Why do we start to get flashbacks, or why do we start to have those memories resurface? I believe that over time, especially if you have distance or separation from the person who abused you, or especially if you have children of the same age or you have a big life-altering event, over time, the trauma can become less threatening to the brain. And so it starts to allow that memory to be released in snippets, because the reality is holding down repressed memories takes a lot of energy because you're constantly in fight or flight. You're constantly on high alert for an invisible threat, because until those memories are processed correctly in your brain is just constantly thinking that there is a threat just around the corner because these memories have been pushed into the unconscious. So it takes up a lot of energy. Once you start to feel, a lot of the time people will either be triggered by something or they'll start to heal, they'll start to feel a little bit better in their life, and then these memories will come forward because they have the space and capacity to deal with them. So a lot of the time the memories are being shown to you because the brain perceives them as less threatening, or that it perceives that you're in a safe place to be able to process them or to see them, or that you're in a good enough mental state to be able to deal with it. I've experienced this personally in that my brain has given me memories over time, you know, in varying degrees of what was happening, with the worst things coming through last, because I had developed a resilience and a method and a way to actually process and heal these memories. It's like my brain knew, and it was like, okay, here's something bigger. Now you're regulated. Now here's something bigger. And it was really giving them to me piece by piece over time. You don't have conscious control over this. When I knew a memory was coming and I felt it coming, because there are ways, there are signs, there are things that you can feel, I couldn't stop it even if I tried. Once the brain is ready and it wants to release it, it will release it in its own time, in its own way. So it comes back. It releases in snippets, in flashbacks, maybe even in intrusive thoughts that just keep popping into your mind and you have no idea why or where they're coming from. It releases in this way. Now, it can also come through in dreams, which then makes it so confusing for people because they're like, did it really happen or am I just dreaming it? If you're dreaming about being raped or murdered or chased or pinned down or sexually assaulted every night and you're having these nightmares or regularly, your brain just doesn't do that for no reason. This is one of the most powerful things that I could teach you and that anybody needs to learn, is that your brain is designed to survive, and it's not going to throw things out there to dysregulate you and to make you afraid if it has no reason. It's just not going to do that. The reason that your brain does that is to keep you alert and to keep you protected from what? From the invisible threats, from the invisible unconscious memories that you're running from. And I remember that feeling. It felt like I was running from something, like something was going to hit me, something was coming for me, and I didn't know what. And I didn't know why I always felt trapped and dark and suffocated. And I'd go in these circles and be like, why am I like this? Until I had those memories, until I remembered the moments where I was trapped or suffocated or in a dark black hole. And those were just the memories trying to resurface and come back. So the thing to know about repressed memories is that it's not there to try and piss you off. They're not there to mess with you. They are there because your brain did that to protect you, because it felt like you couldn't cope with what was happening at that time. They are adaptive in nature. They are not there to hold you back. They are there to keep you safe. And the moment that you realize that your brain is trying to keep you safe, and that you thank your brain and you're happy towards your brain, you're like, thank you so much for repressing these. Thank you so much for trying to keep me safe, but I'm ready to deal with them one at a time. And you start to become friends with your brain and you start to allow those memories in so that you can process them one at a time. That's where you're going to start healing. And I've mentioned memory processing a couple of times now because memory processing to me is so important. I'm going to do a whole episode on this in itself around like what it is and how it works. But even when I do that episode, I always recommend that you process a memory with a therapist. I still process my memories with the assistance of a therapist because it's really difficult to work with memories and with your mind in that way. It is absolutely something that we need guidance and assistance with. If I have a toothache or I have a tooth that needs to be pulled, I'm not going to do that myself. I'm going to go to the dentist. This is the same with your memories. You're not supposed to be able to fix them yourself. You're not supposed to be able to process them yourself. You're not supposed to just push them down or run away from them either. But you're not supposed to have those skills. That is a skill that I've learned over time and that I've developed and that I've then taught other people. So if you want to start processing those memories, you want to start working with a therapist who is trained in repressed memory, in uncovering them, in healing them, and in correctly processing them. I have an online clinic where you can book a therapist on my website. Check it out. It's there for you if you need it. So first I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my repressed memories because I am the example and I'm always happy to share my own stories to be the example to give you an understanding. So the way that my memories came back was actually quite an interesting story. So I had gone through a lot of struggles with Lyme disease and I was very, very ill. I went overseas for medical treatment, and while I was overseas for medical treatment, I didn't know this at the time, but I was having a lot of intrusive thoughts and flashbacks. I believe that the panic of being overseas in another country, having really intense medical treatment, being away from my two children. My boys were 2 and 4 at the time, being away from them, the panic that I felt being overseas, having these intense medical procedures. It just brought up all of this panic. And along with this panic, this new level of panic that I hadn't experienced in a really long time, this level of panic and fear started to bring forward these flashbacks. And I was having flashbacks of my dad doing these things to me. I was having flashbacks. I was having intrusive thoughts about having sex with him, about him raping me, having all of these intrusive thoughts, which were also real memories trying to come through. But I was so sick and so disconnected and just not ready to see it that I just kept pushing it down. And my coping mechanism was when I saw a flashback, I would blink really hard to try and push it down and just forget about it and just push it to the back of my mind. And I got back from overseas and from my medical treatment, and I was as sick as ever. I went through some health things. I did some like cleansing, juice fasting and things like that. And I came out the other side feeling quite good. And I remember just trying to get my body out of that panic state because I'd been panicking I'd been through so much like medical trauma and just fear around what was going to happen with my body that I was like, all right, I need to start doing some healing work around safety. And so I started doing everything I could to create safety. I was repeating the mantra, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe all the time. I was just like rugging up in blankets, having cups of tea, just trying to feel as safe as I could in my body and in my life. And one day I decided to, at this point I was already a healer, already doing healing work. And I decided to do a meditation, and the meditation was a meditation to increase intuition. And I popped the earphones in, and I was really excited, and it was this lovely lady that was like, you're coming up to these 3 doors, and you're going to notice they're different colors, and you're going to pick which door you want to go through, and you're going to be drawn towards one of those doors. So I go through this door, and then there's a pathway, and she's like, you see this pathway, and I could see this kind of like forest, and she's like, there's a guide up ahead, and they're going to take you to a message, and a message that your intuition is here to guide you to, and an important message that you need to know. And I looked up on the path and I saw my dad, and I was like, oh, that's a bit shit. Like, I really wanted a spirit guide. But I went with it because the goal was to trust your intuition and to increase your intuition. So I'm like, it must be him. He has a message for me. And as I started to follow him, the forest started to go dark. And everything started to die and go black and get really scary and creepy. And I felt this sick feeling in my stomach that I'd felt a million times in my life. And I went to take my earphones out. I actually grabbed my earphones and went to take them out of my ears. And something inside of me, my intuition, a voice, I don't know what it was just like, keep going. Just do it. Just trust it. Just keep going. And even though I felt sick, I thought, all right, I'll just keep going. I kept my earphones in, laid back down, and I followed my dad. And she said, he's going to take you to a building. Oh, your guide is going to take you to a building. And there was this big factory building. My building looked like a factory. And again, it started to become like dark and overgrown with weeds, and there was broken windows, and it looked quite scary. And I felt like I didn't want to go in, but I was just fully trusting this meditation. And so I went into this building, and she said, inside the building, there's 3 boxes. And your guide there's going to be a message from your guide in one of these boxes. And so I went to this box and I opened it up. And out came these memories with my dad. And my dad was showing me these memories. And the craziest part is that I'd been having flashbacks of them, of these memories. I'd been having flashbacks of him doing these disgusting things to me. But every time I'd have flashbacks of them for my entire life, I would just tell myself, you're disgusting for thinking about that. You're disgusting for thinking about that. Just blink it down, forget about it. No one can ever know that you think about those things. What the fuck is wrong with you? You got to stop thinking about those memories. And I knew they were memories, but it was like I was disgusting for thinking about those memories. And for the first time in my life, in this meditation, sitting there looking at them, my first thought was, oh, why are those memories in the box? And my second thought was, hold on a minute, why is that happening? Hold on a minute, that's really wrong. Why is my dad doing that to me? That is disgusting. Wait a minute, what? That's not possible. How could my dad be doing that to me? And I freaked out. And I opened my eyes and I called my mum and I said, I think dad sexually abused me when I was younger. I have these memories. And it uncovered from there. But it took me quite a while to come to terms with the fact that they were real, especially because they'd been uncovered in this meditation. And I would I'd be like, yeah, but I've been having flashbacks of these my whole life, but maybe it's just because I had a dream, or maybe there's something wrong with me. And this is something that I hear from clients and from people online all the time. What if it's just something wrong with me? What if I'm just fucked up and I'm thinking these disgusting thoughts and memories about my dad or about somebody, but they actually didn't do anything? And to that person, that doesn't happen. I'm just wanting to let you know that doesn't happen. The brain just doesn't do that. It needs a reference. It needs a point of reference, some context, some past experience to create those thoughts, those narratives. It's the same as people don't have sexual intrusive thoughts about children or about touching children or about molesting people or about having sex with inappropriate people unless that has been done to them. You just don't think that way. The brain just isn't wired that way. If it isn't wired that way. And the only way that it is wired that way is if it has happened to you. And I have now got so good at understanding repressed memory and predicting repressed memory that I've had multiple clients where I've written in their notes file repressed memories. They have repressed memories, and no doubt every single one of them, or that every single one that has returned a month later, 6 months later, 2 years later, has been like, I've just had all these really messed up memories come through. I don't know what to do. You're the first person I thought of because you know about this stuff, and they've come through. And I can predict it now, not because I'm an amazing therapist, which I am, by the way, but because it's easy to see now that I know what it is. Gaps in memory, having feelings towards people and not knowing why they're there, labeling certain people as disgusting, repulsed by them, gross, wanting to move away from them, having nightmares, having unexplained mental health issues, being stuck in fight or flight with no conscious understanding of why, with no trauma. These are all really clear indications that you have repressed memory. And for the people that are having the flashbacks coming through and you're seeing them, I want you to know that your brain doesn't just generate those thoughts. It doesn't just generate random memories. False memory syndrome is not a real thing. And I will be unpacking that on my episode with Dr. Jennifer Freud, whose father was the creator of False Memory Syndrome Foundation. Very messed up story. But it is not a real diagnosis. Your brain just doesn't do that. The only way that your brain would do that is because of psychosis, and psychosis, having these hallucinations and thinking things are real that aren't real, also comes from repressed trauma trying to come through and show you where you're unsafe. There are so many examples of people having psychosis, and it links back later on in life, or it links back once they do the healing work, to specific traumas related to that. I have an auntie who was on the run, who was afraid of being raped, and she was called schizophrenic because there wasn't anybody chasing her, there wasn't anybody coming from her for her, but I believe that there was in her past. I know that there would have been in her past. And so even that, like your brain just doesn't make this up for no reason. It doesn't just pop these memories out for no reason. And the way that you can also tell is that you can't manufacture a feeling that comes with a flashback. When you see the memory and you feel sick and scared and panicked and it triggers you, you can't generate that response out of nowhere with no foundation. If you've never experienced that kind of fear, if you've never experienced that kind of disgust or gross feeling or shame in your life to that level, you don't have that feeling as a point of reference. You don't have that feeling coming through you. You only are able to link that with the memory if you've experienced it in the past. So I just want you to trust what you're seeing. And one thing that I say to people to just help them to get over this obstacle is, even if it isn't real, which it probably is, but even if it isn't real, even if this memory is just a hallucination or it's a visual flashback that is come from somewhere else, whatever it is, it's still worth working on. It's still worth working on because it is causing you suffering. It is still worth working on. When these first memories came through and I went to a therapist to try and work on them, I was like, I don't know if they're real or not, but it's messing with my mind. From the process of then going into the snippets that I had, I uncovered more of the full memory and was 100% sure by the end of that session that it was real. I experienced it, I felt it, I remembered it. The other thing as well, this is kind of quite an intense example, but some of the memories I would have physical responses in that I could smell a certain smell and I would feel a certain feeling in my nose, or I'd feel a certain feeling in my vagina, or when I'd think about something or when a memory would come up. The body sensations, the smells, the feelings, the sensations in your body that are paired with those memories coming back is another very clear sign that it is a repressed memory and that it is not only stored in your unconscious mind but in your body as well. So all memories are stored in your body as well. And for healing, how do we heal? Healing for me equals self-trust. I wish I had have trusted myself from the beginning and not put myself through that pain of like, is it real? Am I crazy? What's happening? I wish I had have had the level of self-trust that I have now when I have a memory come back and I'm like, that's 100% truth. I'm going to work on it and move forward. I spent so long wondering if they were real that I paralyzed myself into not actually getting help, not actually processing them. And so my advice to you would be just even if you can't trust it yet, go to one of these qualified therapists who are going to say to you, this is real and you're not making it up, and let's work on it and let's process it. So you need to be able to process what you're seeing. And knowing, one of the most important things for you to heal is starting to ask yourself right now, because this is what's going to stop you from healing. This is what's going to stop you from believing. I want you to ask yourself, what is the worst thing that could happen if this was true? If these memories were true, what is the worst thing that could happen? And it might be that you lose somebody. It might be that you're afraid of losing your whole family. It might be that you're afraid for your life. It might be whatever it is. I want you to get really, really inquisitive I want you to get really, really honest with yourself about what the worst thing is that could happen, about the reality of why your brain doesn't feel like it's safe for you to fully uncover and trust and know that this is true. And I want you to see if you can start to workshop that by asking yourself this second question, which is, what else could be true? So if your first response is, the worst thing that could happen is that I'm going to have to cut my dad out of my life and I'm going to grieve him, what else could be true is that you don't have to do anything with the memories first up. You actually get to choose what you do with it. And so giving your brain that level of control of like, oh, I actually get to choose what I do with this. Obviously, it's going to be hard to have him in my life, but I actually don't have to cut him out straight away. I can take my time with this. I can think about what I want to do with it. I don't have to send him to jail if I don't want to. I could just cut him out. You have so many other options. So I really want you to be asking yourself over and over, with the fears around uncovering this, what else could be true? What else could I do? What else could be true? Because some people quietly heal. Some people come into therapy and they work on these memories and they quietly cut people out of their life or distance themselves from people and move on with their life. And it's not a huge ordeal where they have to go through a court process and things like that. We get so stuck down on like the rules of what we should or have to do or should do that we paralyze ourselves into actually being able to heal and enjoy life. So those are the two questions that I recommend for you. I hope this episode has been helpful. As I said, I'm going to go into way more depth with Dr. Jennifer Freud. I'm going to go into some episodes around memory processing and things like that. If you have any questions if I've spoken and I haven't answered anything, fire away, because I will absolutely answer them in another podcast episode. I want to say thank you for listening. Send this to anybody who you think needs to hear it, and I will see you next time.